Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Does the West want to keep Africa divided? This question cuts right to the heart of global power, history, and Africa's own unfinished dream. The honest answer isn't simple, and it's definitely not one-sided. Here is the truth. The West has structural reasons to be cautious about a fully united Africa, but Africa's biggest obstacle to unity is Africa itself. Both of these things can be true at the same time. Let's break it down clearly and without any slogans. So, is the West really against a united Africa? The short answer is officially no. You won't find a memo in Brussels or Washington, D.C. that says stop African unity, but a truly united, economically and politically sovereign Africa would completely disrupt the existing global power arrangements. This creates a quiet, subtle resistance, not open opposition. First, let's understand why a united Africa would be such a game changer. Imagine a single African state or federation. We are talking about a population of over 1.4 billion people that is larger than Europe and the United States combined. It would control a massive share of the world's natural resources, energy, minerals, food, and the rare earth elements that power our modern technology. It would be a single, enormous market with collective diplomatic power and coordinated military and security. A bloc like that would no longer be negotiating from a position of weakness. It would be a superpower in its own right. So, how would this affect Europe and America? Let's start with the economic impact. A united Africa could set its own terms for resource extraction. It could tear up exploitative contracts and demand that resources are processed locally, adding value on the continent instead of just shipping raw materials overseas. It could start to compete industrially. For the West, this would mean the end of cheap, easy access to African resources that have fueled its economies for centuries. Then there's the geopolitical impact. A united Africa could vote as a single, powerful bloc at the United Nations. It could resist hosting external military bases and refuse to be drawn into proxy roles in global conflicts. It could align strategically with whichever global power, be it the U.S., China, or someone else, offers the best deal for Africa. This would significantly weaken Western leverage on the world stage, and we can't forget the monetary systems. A united Africa might create a common currency or a new payment system, reducing its dependence on the US dollar, the euro, or the CFA franc. This would strengthen trade between African nations and with other parts of the global south, directly challenging the West's existing financial dominance. Given all this, you might wonder why doesn't the West just openly oppose African unity? Well, for one, open opposition would look embarrassingly colonial, and nobody wants that PR nightmare. But more importantly, they don't have to. Africa's current fragmentation already serves their interests quite well. Soft power, targeted trade agreements, complex aid structures, and bilateral deals with individual nations are far more effective tools than direct confrontation. Today, the strategy isn't divide and rule. It's divide and deal. But here's where we need to be brutally honest. Pointing the finger only at the West is easy, but it's not the full story. Africa is also its own problem. The internal barriers to unity are massive. Let's start with the colonial borders. Yes, they were artificially drawn, splitting ethnic groups and forcing rival communities into single states. This created fragile national identities that persist to this day, but that alone doesn't explain over 60 years of failure to unite. A bigger, more uncomfortable truth is that many of Africa's own political elites benefit from the division. Leaders often gain and maintain power by stoking nationalism and ethnic politics, and by controlling their own small states. A united Africa would dilute their personal power. It would reduce opportunities for corruption and cut off the external patronage they receive from foreign powers. The harsh reality is that some African elites fear unity even more than the West does. Then there are the weak institutions. Across much of the continent, we see a poor rule of law, a lack of accountability, militarized politics, and leadership that is highly personalized. You cannot build unity on a foundation of individuals. It requires deep trust in impartial institutions, and that trust simply isn't there yet. We also have to consider the huge economic inequality between African states. You have oil-rich nations next to resource-poor ones, and large economies like Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt alongside very fragile ones. Many smaller states fear that in a united Africa, they would simply be swallowed up and dominated by their larger neighbors. This fear is a powerful barrier to integration. Now you might say, but what about the African Union? What about regional blocs like ECOWAS and SADC? What about the African Continental Free Trade Area? These Pan-African structures exist, but let's be real. Unity on paper is not the same as unity in power. Enforcement is weak, decision-making is painfully slow, and time and again, national interests override continental goals. So, does the West actively sabotage unity? Not in a cartoon villain sort of way, but it absolutely reinforces the existing fragmentation. It does this by preferring to make deals with individual countries rather than with a unified bloc. It supports friendly regimes that serve its interests. It offers aid that is tied to specific conditions, and it skillfully plays nations against each other economically. This strategy works precisely because Africa's internal cohesion is so weak to begin with. Let's compare Africa to the European Union for a moment. Europe managed to unite after two devastating world wars, driven by a shared fear of total collapse. They built strong, trusted institutions and fostered deep economic interdependence over decades. Africa, on the other hand, hasn't faced that same kind of existential continent-wide crisis to force its hand. Many African nations are still struggling with the basic task of nation building within their own borders. You can't build a strong continental house on unstable national foundations. This brings us back to the core question. Is the West afraid of African unity? Yes, quietly, structurally, and economically, a united Africa is a threat to the current world order. But the more important question is Africa ready for unity? Politically and institutionally, the answer is not yet. The real threat to African unity isn't the West. It isn't even colonial history alone. The real threats are internal: elite self-interest, weak governance, a lack of a shared political vision, and a fundamental failure to build trust across borders. So let's have the final, unsugarcoated truth. Africa will not be united because the West one day allows it. Africa will be united when Africans themselves decide that the cost of division is finally higher than the cost of unity. Unity will become inevitable only when African citizens start demanding continental accountability from their leaders, when leaders realize they lose power by dividing people, when trade finally replaces aid, and when strong institutions outlive powerful personalities. So, to wrap it all up, does the West benefit from a fragmented Africa? Yes. Does it subtly reinforce that fragmentation? Absolutely. But is the West the main reason Africa isn't united? No, Africa's greatest obstacle is, and has always been, internal. The dream of unity is not blocked. It is, for now, unfinished. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. See you in the next video.